Hi, Bill Barber from Poliigon here. In this video we're going to be taking a material from Poliigon.com and setting it up manually in Cinema 4D R20 and then rendering it out with the physical renderer. Before we start though, let's take a look at the file we'll be needing during this video. It's called Wood Flooring 044. I already have it saved to my hard drive and I'll include a link to it below the video. Okay, let's head over to Cinema 4D. Now this is the scene that we'll be working with today. It's a very simple scene, just a plane for our floor material to be assigned to, a skylight with a HDR assigned to it, and we'll use the perspective view here as our rendering camera. So let's get started on making our material. Let's go down to create and then create a new node material. I'm just going to turn on the basic panel here and give it a name of Wood Flooring 044. There we go. Then when you double click on the material, you'll be presented with the node editor. Now if you've not used a node editor before, if you're used to just working with the previous iteration of the physical renderer, then this might be a bit might seem a bit new, but it is very, very good, and it's quite easy to use as well. Now by default it will put in this standard material with a diffuse shader attached to it. And we could keep this. We could, if we added in a glossy shader and then mix them together with a Fresnel value, we could go down the route of creating material that way. But I'm going to show you an easier way. So let's delete those and instead add in a Uber material. Now this assets panel here is where you get all the different nodes from, and you can just type in the first few letters and to narrow down the search. So with the Uber material brought in, I'm just going to give that a name as well. We'll call this Wood Flooring 044 Uber. There we go. So next we need to bring in our materials. So I'm going to type in image and then drag in an image. Then I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V and duplicate it because we need 5 of these in total. There we go. Nice and neat. And now one by one we'll bring in the textures that we need. Ooh, I'm pressing buttons now. What am I doing? There we go. Right. So here we are. So under the file bit of inputs, we'll click here and navigate to where we've saved our wooden floor material, which is in my case here. And the first map we're going to bring in is the color map. Like so. After that we're going to bring in the reflection map. There we go. And then after that the gloss map. You might notice that I've got these .tx files. You probably won't have those. Just ignore them. I think they're automatically generated from another renderer that I use. So yeah, just ignore them. After the gloss map we need the normal map. Where are you? There you are. Now with the normal map you have a choice between NRM and NRM 16. The 16 one is basically a 16-bit TIFF file, which is 32-bit color depth, which basically gives you more detail from the texture. I always use them when I have the option to, which I do here, so I'll bring that one in. And then we have the displacement map, which I'll also be bringing in the 16-bit version of. Okay, so we now have our 5 maps brought in, which is good. But we need to make some adjustments here before we start connecting everything up. The color one is good to go as is the reflection one. The gloss map, we are going to change this mode value to a raw. Now as a general rule, if a texture affects the color of a material, such as the color map but also the reflection map, we leave those as default. Basically it's the sRGB profile. It means that any gamma corrections that the renderer is applying will be applied to those textures. Whereas when you're dealing with maps like the gloss map, normal map, displacement map, etc., they don't contribute towards the color, so we want to change those to raw. So I'm doing that now for these maps. There we go. So with that all done, we're almost ready to get connecting. One thing we do have to do first though is both the reflection map and the gloss map need to be inverted. So I'm going to type in invert, INV, and that will bring up the invert color node. So drop that in and then we'll duplicate that as well and place those there. Now we'll connect these up, and in the previews you can see that we've now got the invert of the original textures. Now the reason we do this, in the case of a gloss map, the physical shader is not expecting a gloss input, it wants a roughness one, which is the invert of a gloss map. So this shader here is effectively turning this into a roughness map. So I'm actually going to call this gloss to roughness. There we go. Now in the case of the reflection map, we invert that simply because different renderers deal with reflection in different ways, and the way our materials have been encoded, they need to be inverted to work properly with the physical renderer. So I'll just call that reflection invert. There we go. So now we can start connecting up our maps. So I'm going to drag the color result into the shader, and then you get this menu where you get to choose where they plug in. And in this case we want the diffuse color input. There we go, and instantly we'll see our materials start to appear on this little preview here, which I can make a bit bigger. There we go. The reflection map goes into reflection color, like so. The gloss map, well, sorry, the roughness map at this point goes into reflection roughness. There we go. The normal map goes into the normal value. There we go. And finally, the wood flooring, the displacement map goes into displacement value. There we go. And that's all the textures now plugged in. So our material will be looking pretty good. One thing I am going to do is quickly rename these so we know what we're doing. Now, it's not that important in this particular video because we are almost done in terms of working with the nodes. But what we will find in the next video, we'll be adding in more nodes, and it's just easier to label everything nice and neatly. So now we know what all our nodes are doing. Good. Let's, at this point, I'm just going to turn on a few features here. Displacement and normal and bump. The reason I'm turning on bump, we're not going to use it now, but we will be using it in the next video, so it's good to get it turned on now. And then we have a couple of things to quickly change here. Yeah, under reflection, normal mode. We want to change that from global to normal map because it's a normal map that we're using. And I'm going to bring up these other channels as well. Under displacement, we want to turn on sub-polygon displacement. Now what that will do is subdivide our mesh, give our mesh more geometry. It'll give the displacement map something to work with. So we need to get that turned on too, and I'll leave those settings as they are. We will need to make some changes, but it's best to do a render at this point so we can see, just get a preview of what's going on at this point. So I'm just going to go to my render settings here and turn the quality down to low so this doesn't take forever. Assign our material to the floor plane by dragging it from here onto the floor. That's actually created 2 copies. Oops. And then you have this tiling option. Now these floorboards are looking really quite big at the moment, so I'm going to up the tiling to 2, and yeah, we should be good to render. So I'll hit the render button and let's see what we get. Okay, so we're getting there. It's definitely working. There's a few things though that we need to address. The first and most obvious is the displacement. It's way too high, and also not enough subdivision. You see these kind of like long edges here, that it's kind of leaving these big giant gaps between the boards. That's because there's not enough polygons for it to work with, and it's just kind of doing its best. So we need to up the subdivision level and lower the strength to fix the displacement. The other main issue we have is these reflections are too blurry. The floor doesn't look shiny enough, especially when compared with the reference images on our website for this particular material. So they're the things we need to fix. So let's go back into our nodes and get to work. We'll sort the displacement out first. That will be nice and easy. We just go down to our displacement here. I'm going to up the subdivision level to 7. That will give us more geometry to work with. and I'm going to lower the displacement height to something like 0.5. And I think that will work pretty well for us. So to fix the roughness map, I'm going to add in a blend node, plug that in there, and put the roughness input into the foreground and the color into the roughness. And then what we have is this blend mode and also this background color. These are the two things we need to adjust. We want to turn the blend mode to multiply, and at this point you'll see the our map completely disappears. And in a roughness map, black means 100% reflective, and you can see that indicated in the material preview. We've now got a very shiny floor. But as we up this black value, say to its original white, it goes back to how it was before. So what we want is a grey value somewhere in the middle. Around 60% should be good. And then we'll rename this our roughness adjust. There we go. So that should fix all of the problems that we had in our little test render. So what I'll do at this point is up the render settings a little, back to high actually, hit render, and we should be good. Okay, so yeah, looking good. Our displacement has been fixed nicely, and our reflections are looking nice and shiny the way they should be. It's a good render. In summary, we've taken a material from Poliigon.com and set it up manually in Cinema 4D R20 using its new node system. Then finally rendered it out with the physical renderer.